Okay, let's start this week's topic. We will be talking about risk management and why it is important for projects. How can we manage risk in project management process? It's an important issue, but firstly, I want to start with the definitions. What does risk mean? So, um, a risk is something negative, right? Negative meaning. I mean, risk somehow a probability, a likelihood of evidence of an incident, sorry, that could happen during the project timeline, and that would affect you badly. I mean, in general, these risks are could be both outside risk and internal risks. Right? There are some risks that carried by your project team, your business, your team, your internal characteristics of your team or of your business. And there are some risks outside of the company that you cannot control, like economic risks, like pandemic risks, technical risks. Some kind of these problems could occur during the project. So, uh, what are some important key concepts here in terms of project management? First of all, we should ask the question of what is the probability, what's likely to happen, okay? And what is the impact? There are these are the two main components of risk: the probability of that risk and the impact of that risk. Okay, it is important because probability means that what is the likelihood to such a risk could occur, right? Come to the face. So if it is too low, the probability is too low. I mean, even if the impact of that risk is too huge, you don't care about that risk that much. What kind of a probable risk that we mentioned, for example? I mean, no one talk about the volcano risk, right? Volcano erupting and killing all of the nature and having a damage. I mean, it's had a huge impact. Maybe it will kill your all business, all project. However, its probability is very low, and then you don't care about this. I mean, you don't have a precaution to this risk. I mean, you don't have a strategy for dealing with that risk. Okay, this is the probability. I mean, or having a earthquake, for example. I mean, earthquake is a very serious risk, right? Especially in Turkey. I mean, we are waiting for an earthquake. But what is the probability of that earthquake first, and what's the probability of that earthquake will damage your facilities? So these are, I mean, low probabilities, right? But with a high impact. But there are some other risk factors, like, for example, today we have a very huge probability of having a financial crisis, right? Economic melting down. I mean, losing the Turkish lira's values and the inflation and all of the unemployment. These are very huge probability risks that we can face in the next years. And what would be the impact on the company then of that risk? Okay, I mean, if you have a financially powerful position, for example, if you have investors from uh, outside Turkey, like Europe, America, so they have a huge financial power, I mean, maybe it's not a very big problem for you. But if you have huge credits, I mean, if you have a very vulnerable financial situation, I mean, it's a huge risk for you. So the first number one rule is risk is contingent. What does contingent means? It depends on one project to another project. It depends on one business to another business. Some risk factors could be a risk for you, but could be an opportunity for another business, another project. Think about this pandemic process. I mean, pandemic is a risk, a very big risk, very big threat for many of the companies. But some of the companies actually enjoying the results of this pandemic, right? Especially e-commerce companies. I mean, you can see, we always see, for example, triangle advertisements in everywhere. I mean, we just get sick of them, right? I mean, boring, but they almost tripled their businesses in this pandemic process. So Sometimes this risk is from where you look. I mean, if you can turn it into an opportunity, or it would be a huge damage for you. So it would be a huge damage for you. I mean, we are focusing today on the damage part, damage aspect, negative aspect of this. So what can be done to minimize it? Risk? Can we decrease the probability, for example, of that risk, or can we decrease the impact of that risk on our company? So, can I? The risk is something uncertain that you don't know. So another question is if there is any signal that you can see that risk is upcoming, it will come in the near future or the middle time future, so that you can take precautions against it. Okay. So what clues should you actively look for seeing that risk is coming? Sometimes people don't see that, right? It's a big problem. I mean, actually, in environmental analysis, like SWOT analysis, as you all know, I guess, we look up for the risks in the threat part, right? And the weaknesses part. I mean, you look at the internal and external conditions of your company, of your business or project team, and you see that there are some threats, there are some risks. So it means that you're actually defining them. You know what are these, and you can expect something like that. So you can get prepared to face with these problems. And then what would be the likely outcomes of that problems and our anticipated reaction? Okay? We should think about this. It's better to think always. So risk management is something that we do before the risk happen, okay, not after the risk happen. So we are planning now. We are at the planning phase of that project, risk management, and we list some risks. Okay, there are some risks in the environment. We know them. We assign them some probability. What is the probability of seeing a financial crisis, for example? What is the probability of seeing a lockdown because of pandemic, right? So these kind of probabilities that we can list, and we also list some impacts. What would be the impact? Is it too bad? Is it too moderate or too low? When you can do that, you can have also develop strategies to deal with risk factors. Okay, let's look at that. So we can define risk as the art and science of identifying, analyzing, and responding to risk factors. As I mentioned before, okay? Risk factors are out there. You see them, you expect them to happen. Some of them is having high probability, some of them having low probability. So you identify them, analyze them, respond them, and through the life of the project, time of the project, you actually try to control them. You try to minimize their bad impacts, for example, or get rid of them. We will see. So project risk means is a specific definition of risk management. Risk management is a broader concept. It's done by businesses as well, and it's actually a different. How can I say? Like some companies have functions, departments dealing with risk management. There are specialists who deal with risk management factors specifically. So, but in project context, a project risk is something uncertain event or condition. Okay, if it occurs, has a positive or negative effect on one or more project objectives. Okay, what are these impacts on project objectives like scope, schedule, cost, or quality? Okay? So you can also now, as you see here, we divide risks into different titles, right? We divide them, we categorize them into different titles, like a scope risk. Okay, the scope risk means that remember, a scope is the written document of your project details, right? Your project plan, and you could have a problem with that. Maybe you misdesigned. You have not have accurate calculations, for example. These kind of problems could occur, and we call them scope risks. What about schedule risks? I mean, there is a time pressure, for example. You are making a project to government, and government asks it in 1 year. And if you don't expect these, meet these timeline, you will get faced with penalties, for example. So it's a schedule risk, right? Uncertain. If you cannot finish the project in 1 year, you will face some penalties. And it's very, very problematic. What about cost risks? You calculate the average plan, the cost plan for a project, but then there are unexpected costs, right, that you didn't plan, that you didn't think of. So it's a risk. And the quality risk, the end product, specifically for technical product development projects or technical projects. I mean, you create something, but it has a low quality. So it's a huge risk. So also, this definition also suggests that there could be positive effect of risks. This actually we generally call it as opportunity. Okay, risk has a negative meaning mostly generally because it recalls the negative impact of these uncertain factors. But if there's a positive effect, we call it opportunity. Okay. So a risk, how do you calculate a risk? So you just multiply probability of that event and the consequence of that event. Okay, the probable, the impact of that event. You just multiply them. There are different calculations about this risk management, not important. The important thing is you should know that a risk is consistent of the probability of that event and the impact of the event. And that impact could be positive and negative, but we generally focus on the negative aspect and we call risk. If we focus on the positive aspect, we call it generally opportunity. As you see here in the graph, we talk about certainty, uncertainty. Okay, uncertainty means that you don't know what is coming to you. Okay, you are just waiting, and someone will come to you. Okay, you don't know who is she or who is he. I mean, it's total uncertain. You have no information, but then you have some information about his gender, his age, his nation, his birthplace, his height, his etc. etc. So you collect some information, right? Then you have more relative uncertainty here. Okay, but if you have the complete information, who is gonna coming to meet you? I mean, you just waiting for your friend Ece, for example. You completely know that. There's no uncertainty. You are totally certain, right? So risk is high when there is uncertainty is high, right? If you don't know who is coming, I mean, how can you develop some plans? I mean, who will be there? What he or she is like to do? What to do with them? How do you talk with them? Does he know Turkish? Does she know English? So who will be there? But when you know the complete information, when you know your friend who is coming, I mean, you know what to do. You have a plan. You have some plan to do with him or her, right? Similarly, in projects, I mean, the amount of risk actually depends on that. How much information do you have on the risk factors? Okay? If you have complete information, actually it's not possible. Generally, no one can have a complete information about the environmental factors. If there were complete information, I mean, the strategic management plans were unnecessary, right? If there were complete information, everyone would know what they need to do. However, some companies are making good decisions, some companies are making bad decisions. This is because there is no complete information, there is no total certainty. There are relative uncertainties, and some companies are uh, actually forecasting the future better than the others, right? And some companies are forecasting bad, and these would be unsuccessful, others would be successful. Okay? Again, let me repeat that is an important thing. If there is complete information on the environment, okay, we don't need any strategies, we don't need any decision-making processes, plannings, this kind of strategic thinking because everything is clear. Everyone knows what is why, what is there, what is the risks, what is the environmental conditions. So rationally, all companies are doing the same thing to be successful. But generally, the uncertainty rate is high. So this is the project lifespan. And as you see here, there are the planning phase and the producing phase. I mean, it's the planning phase of the project where you conceive and develop the project plan, and then you go to executing and finishing part of it. Okay, for this. So as you see here, when you begin planning the project, the opportunity and risk is high at the highest level because there is more uncertainty. You don't know anything about the project. But by the time you are collecting some information, right? And when you start the project, actually you face with the realities. So at the end of the project, when you finish it, there is no risk, there is no opportunity. You just finish the project, right? So the opportunity and risk is decreasing by time. Okay. Second important is the combined risk impact. Okay, risk is out there, opportunity is out there, but the impact on you is low when you plan the project because you don't face them yet. You don't face the risks yet. But the highest impact of the risk would occur in the production phase, right? When you execute and finishing the project. This is the part of it because this is where you most face with these environmental factors and you need to solve the problems, right? And the amount at stake means that the money that you spend on the project, right? Or for that risk, the money that you lose. So it's also increasing because you need to solve the risk problem. So there are 4 stages that we can mention about risk management. First of it is identification of the risk. What is the risk? What is the probability? And the consequences, the second one, analyzing them. And then we will talk about risk mitigation strategies. What does that mitigation mean? We will come to that and then control it. So the type of risks, first of all, identifying the risks. There could be financial risks. There could be technical, commercial, execution, and contractual risks, right? I mean, it's endless. So many types of risks that you can face while you are managing a project, right? Absenteeism of the project members, resignation of some partners. They just leave you on the middle of the way. Staff pull away. You have a very high-skilled employee in your project team, but his functional manager falling back. Okay, I want my meeting. Time overruns, schedule risks. We mentioned about that. You don't have skilled employees, it's a risk, right? Ineffective training of your employees. Specifications are incomplete about a technical project, for example. And the consumer customers change their orders, for example. You produce some product for a customer. You invest in that, you regularly produce that, but they are changing it. Okay, so you need to redesign all the production facilities for it. So as you see here, many examples of that risks, but there are many more that you can name. How can identify these risks? Actually, many people come together and they brainstorm in their project team. Okay, I ask your opinion about that. What would be the risks? And how do you give a probability for that? How much are probable to face a pandemic lockdown, for example? I'm asking to you guys, and you are coming to a common idea, common conclusion. So these kind of things is very popular in brainstorming, okay, to identify the risks. You can take the opinion of some experts. If you, for example, develop something technical, something that you need engineering specialties, I mean, you can ask some opinion to them, some experts, what could be the risks of that production. And your experience actually is very important in that. If you are doing a similar project, if you have done that before, you know what kind of problems that you will face. It's very valuable. So experience is very valuable, right? If you, for example, second time doing such a project, you know where were the problems, so you will be moving more wisely. And multiple assessments, team-based assessments. It's also you assess the team risk factors. I mean, you ask the team, okay, multiple assessments. Let me look at that. I couldn't remember what that. I'm sorry. Anyway, so risk breakdown structure, we talk about this. There could be external risks, right? Internal risks. So external risks could be, for example, market risks, environmental impact risks like pollution, community protests, or market risks like customer acceptance, profit potential. These are external risks. And internal risks like technical and organizational risks that you can mention. So as we have done work breakdown structures, we could also develop risk breakdown structures to manage risk in a better way. When you do it more detailed, you could develop detailed strategies, right? I mean, for example, if you just say don't see the level 2 and level 3, there are external risks for that project. So what would be that risks, right? I mean, I need some details. There are some market risks. Okay, so what kind of market risks? I mean, there are trillions of risks in the market, right? So you should define them as detailed as possible. So risk impact matrix is something that we mentioned more and more. Let me do it again. Likelihood of that risk and the consequences of that risk, okay? If the likelihood is high, consequences is high, it's a problematic risk, okay, here. If the likelihood is low and the consequences are low, you don't care about that risk. You don't need to do anything. But there are some risks in between. So as you see here, you can categorize some risks like higher than anticipated operating expenses, like cost risk, right? Establishing conflicting standards and potential unachievable project requirements. And construction cost and schedule impacts associated with delivering a sustainable building. These kind of things that you can list, tons of them. And you need to write a likelihood here and the impact of it, okay? And the litigation, the legal aspect of it, they added, and responsible parties here. So there are project risk scoring calculations, but I don't want to introduce that for you because there are many simple models and we don't need to do them actually. Don't worry about them. But don't forget that the two components are here: probability, okay, and the consequence, okay, likelihood and the impact. These are the two important things about calculating the risk. It's very important. So you just somehow make some mathematical calculation. It's not a function that is true, the ultimate function, right? It's just a mathematical calculation. I mean, you can just multiply them and divide the two to find the number. I mean, it's not important, but there are some more complicated calculations like that. What about some mitigation strategies? Come to that point. This is more important. I mean, here is your project. You have come to an edge and you have seen some problems. I mean, you could avoid the risk, right? You could mitigate the risk. You solve the problem somehow. You could transfer that risk to another company, another insurance company, or you accept that risk and go down. So let's look at them a little bit. So avoiding is the best thing that you avoid, but if you cannot avoid, it would hurt your project, right? So sometimes it could be an option. I mean, for example, you want to build a building, okay, in some place, but you know that it's the land here is not actually good. I mean, there is a risk of let's say earthquake, or the land is not that solid, is not that good. So you just avoid that place and change the geography of your, change the location of your building, right? You avoid that problem, avoid that risk. You just seek for more certain, more less risky places you look for it. Or you can mitigate it. Mitigate means that taking some sort of action so that cause it to do as little damage to your project as possible. You decrease the negative impacts of that risk. Or you could transfer that risk by making insurances, right? Actually, we do that in, for example, our traffic, right? we make Casco. I mean, do you have cars? I don't know. Do you have a driving license and do you drive? Do you drive, guys?
No.
No, you don't have.
No.
Okay. Hopefully, you will have a car in the future. So, when you buy a car, you make some, you take some insurance as well, right? If there is any traffic accidents, Allah korusun, they will pay the money, right? So you just actually transfer that risk to another company by making insurance. You pay some amount of money, of course, but you don't think about that. But if there will be this kind of problem, so in a project, you could also do that. Sometimes you should accept that risk, but it doesn't mean that it should not mean that there is nothing that you can do, right? I mean, you take the risk, you take the consequences, and you accept the consequences, financial consequences of it, or you extend the deadline, for example, or you find a new project member. So these are problematic issues, but sometimes you just have to face with that. These are what that we call accept, minimize, share, transfer. Contingency reserves. That is another strategy that you can do. You can dedicate some amount of money in case of that you face with risk during the project. Solve that risk, for example. And what about controlling the risk? Okay, who will control the risk? So what will be controlled, when, why, and how? So here, actually, this is done. Documentation, and you're just trying to codify the risks and try to codify your responses and how do you manage that risk. These are the things. I want to mention another thing also here. Let me share another. What is that? Here's my. Okay, I want to show you that how can you work with this probability and impacting, okay, in the project risk management. So probability, as we said, the likelihood that the potential problem will occur, and the impact is the seriousness or severity of that potential problem. So you actually make a calculation here and create a priority. I mean, here the formula is just adding them and dividing them too, but there are different calculations as I showed you in the other slide. No important. I mean, there are different perspectives. There are more complex calculations, but the important thing here is just to give a priority here. Okay, the mathematics does not much matter, but here is the easiest way to sum them and divide them too. Okay, so first of all, you need to decide which risk likelihood your risk factor has. Okay, for example, if it's very low, you just give a score of 20. If it is low, unlikely to occur, you give 40, medium 60, high 80, and very high is 100. Okay, this is the actually probability score that you give for a risk factor, and then you score the impact of that risk, right? From very low to very high, like giving the scores again, like that. If there is insignificant impact, you give them 20. If it's low, minor impact, it's 40. So this kind of a risk impact table that you can develop. Okay, and here actually you give the priority score, priority rating, and you can also color this, not necessarily, but you can provide colors. And now, as you hear, there are some risk IDs. You list your risks. Okay, you write down your risks here, and you just write the likelihood and the impact of the risk as well. Then you calculate the priority of that risk. Okay, as you see here, likelihood plus impact divided by 2. You come up with some priorities, and you give them the rate of medium, high, low, very high, or medium. So when you look at that risk priority table, you can now see that which risks are more important for you, which risks that you need to take some precautions against, right? For example, 2.2 is very high. It's very important one. You should really focus on that. Its likelihood is very high, the impact is very high, so you need to somehow solve this risk problem. Okay, but here, as you see, 2.1 is low. You don't need to just much worry about them. I mean, you can develop some strategies against it, but it's not much probable to happen. You just don't need to give it a priority. Likewise, I mean, each of the project risk factors that you can talk about this, develop some strategies about that. For example, rating is very high, 2.2. What was that? Preventive actions. How can preventive actions that you can take? Clearly identify the expected business benefits, project sponsor, contingent actions, measure the actual business benefits achieved by the project, like this. So, I mean, actually, you also need to develop some plans, develop some actions, activities against these projects. Okay. Yes, this is it for me today. Any questions that you want to ask?
I don't have. Thank you.
Thank you. By the way, I want to show you something more if I can find the document. In your project plans, I would ask you to identify your risks and give them a priority. Okay. So let me find that to show you. Anyway, I couldn't find it, but I will ask you to prepare top 10 risks for your project plans, guys. Okay, and you need to think about your project's potential risks and give them a priority. Okay, so the thing is that you need to do is just look at this probability. I find it. Okay, let me show it to you. This would be the outline of your paper that you need to submit at the end of the semester. So top 10 risks. At the list of 10, the highest risk to the project success, equaling the probability of their occurrence, level of impact, and brief description of mitigation strategy. So you need to describe the risk first. You need to give a probability of it from 100 out of 100. You should give an impact factor from 1 to 5. And you need to tell us what will be your solution if you face with that risk factor. Okay, so you will prepare this at your project plans. Okay. By the way, please try to develop some project idea. Okay, any idea that you can mention here, because you will need to write this report for me. So here you see the general information part, and then problem, assumptions of the project, project description, project scope, project plan summary, objectives, goals, right? Critical milestones. I mean, we will see about this in the next lecture, and then financial summary of that project. So these are the issues that I wanted to talk to you today. Okay, thank you. If you don't have any questions, we can finish.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, see you next week.